Well, the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial has been rocked by another dramatic development. About 24 hours ago, defense advocate Malesela Teffo announced that he was withdrawing from the case. He's accused the court and the state of harassing him. He was counsel for accused 1 to 4. A fifth accused is being represented by advocate Zandile Mshololo. Teffo said he could not take any more harassment from the state and the court. How does this then affect the trial moving forward? We're joined by legal expert Ulrich Roux. Ulrich, good to have you on the program. So let's begin with the reason why Advocate Teffo says he's now withdrawing, and he cited alleged harassment by the state and the court. Was withdrawing from the case his only option?
Hi, good afternoon, Tembekile. Thank you for having me. Yes, certainly an unprecedented move by Advocate Teffo. The standard procedure which he could have followed, and in my opinion, which he should have followed, is to have brought an application for the judge to recuse himself. And that application would have had to be substantiated by proper reasons as to why he said that the judge had to recuse himself. For instance, if the judge was conflicted or if the judge was not acting in an objective, unbiased manner. And then to bring a proper application before court, which would then have been considered by the judge. And if he chose not to recuse himself, then he would have been able to approach a higher court in order to try and enforce that recusal application. Similar to his claim that he was being harassed by the state advocate, he could have also brought an application for the state advocate to recuse himself or herself. He unfortunately did not choose to follow those routes and instead has now withdrawn from the matter, which effectively only prejudices his own clients or his erstwhile clients. They will now have to find new legal representation, and this will no doubt cause a substantial delay in the finalization of the matter.
Just on that then, the inconvenience, shall we say, to his clients. Now, Advocate Teffo had already laid out, especially during his cross-examination of the first witness, his position. In fact, he's maintained throughout that he does not believe that the 5 men who are on trial killed Senzo Meyiwa on that night in 2014. He had wanted that docket, which the state says it's not pursuing. It was drafted by a junior, and that's not how they're proceeding, which would then have charged Kelly Kumalo, who was Senzo Meyiwa's girlfriend, her sister, her mother, Longotwala, and others for allegedly committing this crime. Does a new lawyer coming in now warrant a complete change in terms of the argument and position as to why these men are not guilty?
Well, unfortunately, legal representatives act on instructions from their clients. So one can only assume that his clients, the accused 1 to 4 in the matter, instructed him to present that version to court. And that is obviously, as we heard in the beginning of the trial, that Kelly Kumalo was in fact the person who pulled the trigger that killed Senzo Meyiwa, as alleged by Advocate Teffo. So the accused would be bound to that version now, and the attorney that takes over from the matter would have to continue that version, because we act, we are creatures of instructions, as we say, and we act on instructions from our clients. So one can only presume that his clients instructed him to forward that version to the court. If that was, however, not the case, then if the matter does go on appeal or review, then the accused would be able to present their real version to court, and then they would have to allege that Advocate Teffo did not act on their instructions, and that was in fact never their version from the outset, and that it was Advocate Teffo's own version that he presented to court. So one would have to wait and see now, when a new legal representative comes on board and acts on behalf of these accused, whether that version is still going to be presented to the court.
You've got Advocate Teffo, who's now withdrawn from the case. You've got a witness who's been on the stand, one witness who's been on the stand for the months that we are now into these proceedings. I think we've been doing this since about April, and it's still Sergeant Thabo Musia who's the witness, right? Advocate Zandile Mshololo now has to continue her cross-examination. You've got the issue about the 2 dockets. That now appears to have been resolved. You've also got what was raised yesterday around jurisdiction, abandoned as well by Advocate Malesela Teffo, but also the issue of abuse allegations that the inmates have suffered at the Koshimampuru Correctional Facility, in particular, accused number 3. When you look at all the different moving parts in this case, what needs to happen now, Ulrich, to sort of bring it all together, clean it up, in order for the trial to actually proceed in the interest of both the victim and the accused?
Yes, that certainly is an interesting question. And remember, every trial has its own intricacies and its own unique factors that a presiding officer needs to take into account at all times. But it is an arena in which the legal representatives can explore all avenues and possibilities and legal remedies available to them and to their clients. And, the fact that Advocate Teffo brought to the attention of the presiding officer the fact that accused number 3 was being assaulted in the Kgosi Mampuru prison, or the jurisdictional issue, or the version raised pertaining to the 2 dockets, those were all permissible, and it is all factors that the presiding officer would have to take into account when finally reaching a conclusion in this matter. However, the first step that now needs to take place is those 4 accused will be granted an opportunity to secure new legal representation. Remember that in terms of the Constitution, they are entitled to legal representation and to be represented during a trial. So the judge will grant them that opportunity, and once the new legal representation comes on board, they will have to familiarize themselves with the matter. In other words, have the record typed up of what has transpired during the proceedings thus far, and ensure that they are up to speed with it so that they can adequately represent their clients. Once that has taken place and they've confirmed that they are in a position to proceed, then one will have to wait and see whether these additional applications will be pursued. For example, the jurisdictional issue, the 2 dockets issue, whether there would be an application for the NPA to review their current position or not. So there are numerous factors that still need to be taken into consideration. And unfortunately for both the accused as well as the families of the deceased and everyone else involved in this matter, it is only going to lead to further delays in the finalization of this. An accused person does also have a constitutional right to a fair and a speedy trial, and one would expect that the presiding officer would now drive the proceedings in order for that fair trial to be pursued and for the matter to reach finality as soon as possible, having regard to all of the rights that are applicable here in terms of the Constitution.
Right. Help us understand the concept in law of a watch brief, because that's now the role that Advocate Teffo is going to be taking. He said he's on a watch brief for the Meyiwa family, well, mainly Senzo Meyiwa's brother, Senzo Meyiwa, who is also against these men being tried, yet another part of the Meyiwa family believes that these are the right suspects to stand trial. So what exactly does an advocate do on a watch brief?
So the term is a watching brief, and it refers to the appointment of a legal representative to protect the interests of the complainants in a matter or anyone else affected by a criminal charge being laid other than the accused. So, for instance, in practice, we very often act on behalf of complainants in a matter, and we assist them in drafting the required affidavits in order to lay a criminal charge, and then to work together with the South African police and the state in order to ensure that a prosecution takes place and that the matter is prosecuted until finality. So that would be the position of Advocate Teffo now. If he says that he is acting on behalf of Senzo Meyiwa's brother in the capacity of a watching brief, and that would be to ensure that, on his version, the right people who should be the accused in this matter are brought before court, and that a prosecution is pursued against them, and that the matter reaches finality in that regard.
A watching brief. Thank you very much for that correction. I wanted to ask you about the political element. Advocate Teffo had made in court an allegation that there'd been interference from even the likes of Police Minister Bheki. Yesterday, one of the other allegations that he made was that the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was somehow also involved in his arrest, which happened in rather dramatic fashion as proceedings wrapped up a few weeks ago. Do you expect those political dynamics, those allegations, to feature at all in how this case proceeds now that he's no longer an active advocate for the accused?
In theory, they should not play a role whatsoever. The only factors that a presiding officer, a judge in this instance, needs to take into consideration are the facts pertaining to the actual criminal trial that is unfolding before him. And that is the evidence that is being presented by the state, the cross-examination of the witnesses that the state calls, and then the defense case and their witnesses and the subsequent cross-examination of that. That coupled with the exhibits that are handed up in court all contribute towards all of the evidence being placed before a presiding officer, and the presiding officer then making an objective, informed decision subsequent to having heard all of the evidence presented to him or her. So in short, all of the political involvement, so-called political involvement, all of the sideshows, all of the involvement pertaining to Advocate Teffo's arrest, all of that should be ignored by the presiding officer, and he should merely focus on the facts that are before him and as presented by the state and the defense.
Oh, really good to see you as always. Thank you very much for your time today.